everyone. Welcome to the Film for Fans podcast, the podcast from movie fans for movie fans. I am your host, Ryan Dunlevy, joined by my co-host, Rob Dunham.
Hello.
We've got an excellent show for you today. We are going to be, of course, breaking down the box office. We'll talk a little bit about the writer's strike being over. And then we've got another one that I'm going to throw out to Rob that he is not aware of yet. And then we have a couple of good discussion items. Yes, a couple good discussion items. We're going to be talking about non-linear storytelling films, as well as recommendations for what to watch on Peacock and Prime for you. Of course, our watch list is thrown in there too. All right, Rob, you ready to get started?
Yeah.
All right, so first up, let's talk about the box office from this last weekend. And the box office was dominated by first week in the box office films. A number of them came out last week. And I should say, unforeseen circumstances interrupted us recording a podcast last week. So we apologize for there being no Film for Fans podcast last week. Hopefully we'll be back on a regular schedule now. But
I may have told one fan of the podcast and they may have responded with an angry face emoji. So yeah, we're glad to be making you happy again.
Yes, indeed. But here we go. The box office looked like this. Number one, Paw Patrol, the mighty movie. 22.7 million in its first week in the box office. Number two, Saw 10, 18.3 million first week in the box office. The Creator, 14 million in its first week. The only one that's not a new release, The Nun 2, did 4.7 million, almost 4.8 million in its fourth week in the box office. And coming in fifth, The Blind, 4.3 million in its first week in the box office. So a solid performance by a bunch of these movies. I think all of them, I would say, performed relatively solidly given their stakes. Anything that sticks out to you with any of these movies?
I probably think the people behind The Creator were hoping it did way more than that, given the fact that I think every movie I went to the last 3 months, it seems like there's a trailer for it. And there's like advertising, at least in the theater, there's advertising all over the theater for it, a ton of trailers for it. I don't know if I saw necessarily a ton of advertising.
I didn't either. I didn't see much outside.
But it seemed like they were really pushing it in the theater.
The benefit on this one is it had a very small budget. Yeah, I think I want to say it was 40 million in budget. Okay. I have it listed somewhere that I had it written down and then I forgot to transfer it over. But it was done with a really low budget, and I actually can probably look that up. And it was made with like $4,000 cameras. So it's a pretty impressive feat. But yeah, I think if there was anyone that you say maybe was a disappointment, I would think maybe The Creator. But it was going up against some horror movies in October. So that's always a little bit of a thing.
Yeah,
so.
Paw Patrol is pretty scary.
That's true.
Yeah.
Paw Patrol, but that's a kid movie.
Chase turned into a zombie. I'm not expecting that.
Yeah.
Bad dog. Yeah.
I am still interested in seeing The Creator. One of the reason we didn't record last week is because I got injured. And that injury is also why I did not get to see The Creator last week. I am really hoping I get the chance to see it this weekend. That would be my goal. But again, Saw coming in there, 18 million. So that's right. And what we had identified as like the standard horror movie genre. This one, obviously the 10th movie in the series, has a long-standing appeal in the series.
I mean, and say what you will about the series, for the 10th movie in a series to make almost $20 million over the weekend says something about the series for sure.
For sure. Have you seen many of the Saw movies?
I saw I hate using the word Saw when you talk about Saw, because you don't want to say I saw.
I watched.
I've seen Saw.
I
I did see a meme my wife sent me that said it was a text conversation. The
Mhm.
person said, "Do you want a seesaw this weekend?" And the next picture was two kids on the seesaw. And the other person replied, "I'm never talking to you again." Um, I saw the first three.
Okay.
I like when they first came out. I saw the
Mhm.
first three. Over the course of time, I've seen. I don't know if I've seen all of them. I've seen almost all of them.
Mhm.
And I saw the new one in the theater
Okay.
this last week.
Okay.
So I have seen quite a bit of the series.
I don't remember how many I've seen. I've probably watched, I want to say the first two or three. After that, I don't know that I've seen any of the other ones. I was actually very impressed with the first one when I eventually got around to seeing it. I thought it was just a kind of a standard horror movie, but it's far more, I mean, it's dark, but it's far more psychological in nature and some interesting twists on that front.
And I have some interesting thoughts on the new one.
Okay.
In relation to how the series has gone, how it's progressed,
Mhm.
how it started, where it went in the next few movies, what they did with this one.
Okay.
I think is a little bit different than some of the others.
Sure. Nice. Yeah, we'll look forward to hearing that in our
Mhm.
watch list section. Any other comments on the box office?
I don't think so.
Yeah, fairly well broken down box office, a fairly solid week for early fall here. So I think in general, theaters are probably relatively pleased in the absence of major blockbusters to get a bunch of solid producing films there. All right, so we have a couple of new movies coming out this week, and they are, of course, horror in nature. And the first one is Exorcist Believer. And the synopsis of this one is two parents seek help when their respective daughters show signs of demonic possession. And this one stars Leslie Odom Jr., Ellen Burstyn, Ann Dowd, Lydia Jewett. And yeah, so that's the basic cast there. The Exorcist Believer. So that is the latest in the Exorcist series. I think there's been one or two other ones outside of the original Exorcist movie. I think they did a re-release of Exorcist, like an updated version of it a while back as well. And the second one is When Evil Lurks. All right. And this one is another horror movie, of course, and it's the residents of a small rural town discover that a demon is about to be born among them. They desperately try to escape before the evil is born, but it may be too late. And this one stars Ezekiel Rodriguez, Damian Solomon, Silvina Sabatar, and Virginia Garofalo. All right, so we got two horror movies that are the new entrants. I should also say, in some places, you will see a 30th anniversary re-release of Hocus Pocus, the 90s witch film that was popular back in the day. So that's kind of a new release in there. So thoughts on the you're the resident horror expert at this point on the podcast.
Well, I do want to see it. And it looks pretty intriguing.
Which one?
Exorcist.
Exorcist. Okay. Yeah.
Is the mother in the first movie is a grandmother in the new one. So it's very much a continuation of that storyline, that family. The whole tagline of the movie is like, this has happened before. So one thing that I'm very interested about with seeing it is with the original one, when I ended up watching it, there was like no shock value or real anything that really scared me because I already knew everything. Like
because it's such a legendary horror
film. All the famous scenes and stuff I had seen like outside of the context of the movie.
Yeah.
So they kind of lost their like shock factor or their like disturbing factor to me when I actually got around to watching the movie.
I can see that.
So I'm interested in seeing if the new one has some of that in a way that could, evoke some emotion.
Yeah. And we've seen this before in terms of like classic 70s and 80s horror films that the chain has kind of continued on going down the line, and something that's reappeared a little while later. So it will be interesting to see how this compares to the other ones. These are like by definition the type of movies I intentionally don't go see. So I don't have an intention to see this. They kind of like evil demonic movie thing is just, I just don't get involved in that. And they're like, it's one of like the prime reasons I don't watch horror movies along these lines. So for me, I don't have any thoughts or opinions because I don't intend on seeing any of them. But it will be interesting to see how well they are received, because this is like horror. This is like the horror movie month. Like this is when they come out. This is when people want to go see this stuff. So we'll be curious to see what it does box office wise. We have seen that the horror movies that have some kind of legacy to them have continued to do well in the box office. So it'll be interesting to see. Any other thoughts on the new movies?
No.
Okay, so there's a lot of movies out. As you saw, there's 4 that came out last week. We got 2 more plus a re-release coming out this week. And so you have plenty of options to choose from, whether you like horror, don't like horror, you got options. All right. So in one bit of good movie news, the writer's strike is over. Yes. The writer's strike is over. It is finished. That was a good sign to see. I think when we originally did a story on this, I read an article from one of the, I think it was Warner Brothers, or one of the executives said, I think it'll be done by the end of September. And they were pretty much dead on with the writer's portion of it. That's exactly when it ended. Looks like they were able to get a contract everyone was sufficient on. They wrestled through some of the AI things, some of the things about staffing and writers' rooms were settled and negotiated. So writers are back in. Now, where this affects most immediately is things like late night comedy and late night TV, because a lot of those writers can immediately go back to work. The actor strike is still going on. I'm actually kind of surprised that hasn't been resolved, given the resolution of the writer strike. The actor strike is still on. So things like movie productions, you can resume some of the back stuff and those type of things, but the actual actor still being on strike is we're still delayed movie wise on that front, but it is good to see some progress moving forward. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm just excited to see, some content.
Yeah.
Some movies that we want to see are not having to be delayed anymore.
Yeah.
Very nice.
You can tell if you've watched any fall TV, you could tell like they're scrambling for lineup things. ABC is borrowing Monday Night Football games. I saw Wheel of Fortune in prime time the other day. Like Wheel of Fortune in prime time. Like we're busting out the game shows again. So you've definitely seen this was starting to take its toll. But I think the first thing that will return, like the late night comedy shows and stuff, can go back to their writing and those type of things. So you'll see it there first, but hopefully, because we've gotten over some of the hurdles with the writers, hopefully that means the actors will be shortly behind there, and we can all get back to watching the films we were hoping to watch at the times we were hoping to watch them. All right. Anything else on that?
Nope.
All right. So now I'm going to throw out another bit of, I wouldn't say news, but it's being heavily rumored that Christopher Nolan is in talks to direct 2 James Bond films. Yes, Christopher Nolan is rumored to be in negotiation to direct 2 upcoming James Bond movies, which he would also be the producer. The talk around this is that they will be direct adaptation of Ian Fleming novels, which means they will be set in the 50s and 60s, potentially, in those fronts. So period piece, Christopher Nolan, James Bond movies.
It's like someone put all my favorite things together, take them to a wall.
So it's hard not to be super excited about this. Thoughts? What are your thoughts?
I super excited and terrified. I really don't want to mess that up. So I have faith that it would be It'd be definitely a bit different than anything he's done before, I think.
And we really haven't seen this type of Bond movie before. Say this goes forward and he's doing period piece Bond movies. We haven't seen this before because all the Bond movies have been set in contemporary era. Now, of course, we knew what a 60s Bond movie looked like because they were made in the 60s. But what does it look like to make a 60s Bond movie today? That's kind of fascinating with the modern technology, with the modern filmmaking and modern style to do a 60s era Bond movie. I don't know what that looks like, but I have confidence that Christopher Nolan can pull it off. My other thought with this initially is I think they'd be smart to do it this way because we saw with the Batman films, once Christopher Nolan made his Batman films, Batman has not been the same since. And they've had a hard time competing with the legend that was Christopher Nolan's Batman. However, if you send Christopher Nolan Batman movies back in time, that doesn't affect another director coming in and doing a modern era Bond film for the next after this. It doesn't affect that at all because you don't have apples to apples comparisons with Christopher Nolan's movies. So you're not going to set yourself up for failure later down the line because nobody can compete with Christopher Nolan. Yeah. So I think that's fascinating aspect of it too. No. Okay. Do you think this is more likely or less likely that Tom Hardy will be Bond?
It probably makes it more likely.
So the next question is, what character will Cillian Murphy pay?
Some bad guy.
Yeah, you think it's a bad guy?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
All right. I think you could twist Cillian Murphy into a Q type character, but I think that'd be an underutilization of Cillian Murphy. Yeah. And how would he didn't do it in Batman, but the idea of how do you get nonlinear storytelling in James Bond? It's a little foreshadowing of what we're going to talk about next.
It's a little time machine action.
Could we go straight Austin Powers in this one?
Oh, sure. Mike Myers is James Bond.
Oh man. Yeah, what movie was I watching? Oh, I forgot one that was like, oh wait, that's Mike Myers. Mike Myers in a serious role? What was going on here?
He was in the Queen movie in a serious role.
Yes.
He's done a few others.
Yeah, he has. It's just always kind of surprising when you see it.
Yeah.
All right. So that we'll definitely be paying very close attention to this one because if that's where he goes next, I'm all in on it. So move on to our discussion. This one came to me. I was recently watching a podcast about a specific movie, which we'll be talking about during this, and it prompted this question in their discussion, and it was the best films to use nonlinear storytelling. So what are the best films that we have heard of that use nonlinear storytelling? And what that means is telling the story out of time consistent order. So that can mean a number of different things, but that's the basic idea, is that you're telling some parts of the story at different times than where they would occur if you told it along a single timeline. Hopefully that's not too confusing as an explanation, but films that use nonlinear storytelling, hopefully you'll also get clarity once we start talking about the specific movies, because we'll be able to explain that a little bit. So let's go back and forth. You do one, I'll do one. So what's one from your list? Nonlinear storytelling.
So we were just talking about Christopher Nolan, the nonlinear storytelling, and Christopher Nolan is nonlinear storytelling.
Yes. Yes, he is. And we promise we're not doing more than 2 Christopher Nolan movies here.
But one of the ones that the movie that kind of got him on the map with a lot of people is a movie called Memento. With Guy Pearce as the main character, Leonard, covered in tattoos all over his body. to help him remember where he's been, what he's doing, what he needs to do next. It's got pictures with all that stuff in it. And that movie is fascinating because there is one storyline happening in color scenes that are shown, and then there's a black and white storyline also going on, and you don't really understand where they're meeting up until they meet up.
Yeah.
And it's just phenomenal and chaotic, and like first time I watched it, it's very confusing. But also this movie, the first time I watched it, I immediately rewound and watched again when it was over.
Yeah.
Because I need to see it again.
Yeah. It introduced to people Christopher Nolan, but also what would become a recurring theme of his is screwing around with time in his movies and his use of time within movies, and how interesting, original, and different that makes his movies is how he handles the concept of time throughout them, which is a really fascinating topic in general for how movies handle time. But Christopher Nolan became known for this type of storytelling, and Memento was the first one that he came up with. And it is still such a brilliant use of non-linear storytelling, and almost to the point of telling the story backwards.
Yes, I mean it's non-linear, but also like the aspects of the different storyline aspect of it is that you're seeing part of the non-linear story is that you're seeing the story from different characters' perspectives, and then they're all unified into this is actually happening right now at a certain point in the movie.
Yeah.
Definitely, if you've not seen that movie, you should check it out.
For sure. It will definitely mess with you. All right, the first one that I am going to do is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. This one has a fascinating version of nonlinear storytelling, because in some instances, the way some movies handle it is you can tell you're jumping around in timelines. You can tell you're jumping around. A movie I'm going to talk about later on this list is like this. You know you're jumping around, and your mind is following the story as it leaps back and forth across the timeline. This is one where you don't. This is one where it's done so cleverly, and it's done in such a way that you don't necessarily pick up on this immediately. And the moment you pick up on the idea, and I think you're going to talk about one that's like this, the moment you pick up on the idea that there are multiple timelines happening, it becomes this aha moment, this moment that changes how you view the story. And it gives you a different look at it. And in particular, the way Kate Winslet's character is portrayed in this movie is the main thing that hides the nonlinear storytelling, is who her character is, how her character is portrayed, and specifically, I'll say her costuming, as it were, is really what hides this and makes it well done from that standpoint.
Yeah, I mean it's one of my favorite.
Yeah.
Too. So
yeah,
Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet are both phenomenal in this movie.
And early in the podcast, we went through movies that we changed our opinions about. And this is one of the ones that I've absolutely changed my opinion about the most directly. I absolutely hated this movie the first time I watched it. Hated it. And I came around to it as I gave it another shot a couple of times. Like second time I watched it, oh, you know what? That wasn't as bad as I thought. Third time I watched it, like, okay, no, that's actually a really good movie. And so it's been on my list now since, as a result, that I came to really appreciate the style of filmmaking it is. All right, what's your next one?
Next one on my list is Arrival.
Ah, yes.
And if you haven't seen Arrival, you should probably stop listening for the next minute or so.
Yes, if you have not seen Arrival, you need to see it first.
Yeah.
Before we tell you anything about that. So just go ahead and skip, let's say 2 or 3 minutes ahead.
Because the whole concept of the movie Arrival is that you don't know that there's time travel going on, or non-linear storytelling going on until it happens.
Similar to Eternal Sunshine.
Until it dawns.
Yeah.
and it's brilliantly executed.
Oh my, yes.
In the development of the story.
Mhm.
And there are some lines in it that after you've seen it the first time, you hear the characters say certain things and they hit you in an entirely different way than the first time you saw it, because you understand more of the background and what's,
Mhm.
what's happening and what's coming next, and the emotional depth and weight of it. Just for an example, the beginning first 2 minutes of the movie have an entirely different meaning to you after you've seen it the first time.
Yes.
And for me, it's a very emotional movie. I think I cry every time I watch this movie.
It is.
Not ashamed to admit it. Part of that is that it has, so the beginning of Arrival has the song "On the Breaking of Daylight" by Max Richter, which is also the movie Shutter Island.
So
and
good.
In both movies, it's used to phenomenal emotional effect.
Yes.
And so I can kind of not hear that song without feeling it.
Yeah, it is. Like the realization as it dawns on you just gives you an emotional punch when you realize not only what they're telling you, but the implications of what they're telling you just hit you. It is very impactful.
And this is certainly a movie that if you have kids, it has a whole nother level of emotion added to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolute must see. It is an absolute must see. This one, I have no equivocation. You have to see this movie. Denis Villeneuve directs it. And
this is one of the reasons why we love him and why we're so excited about the writer's strike being over so soon too.
Yes. Yes, for sure. Oh my goodness. Yeah. I think, I want to say like 2015, 16, back-to-back years, I made Denis Villeneuve movies, or maybe it's 16, 17. I made his movies number one on my list. And one year it was Arrival, and the next year it was like Blade Runner 2040, 2049. Both phenomenal movies. But yeah, this Arrival is definitely up there on amongst my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah, and to use time in the way it's used in that movie as a method of communication.
Yeah.
And a weapon, and just like defense against other people attacking or other races attacking. It's just it's like I said already, it's just a brilliantly crafted idea and executed
and
very well.
Just even in addition to the nonlinear storytelling, it kind of turns the alien invasion genre subgenre on its head. And it does it in such a subtle way where it really plays with the fact that you think you know how this is going to turn out, and you don't. It really understands the subgenre and plays around with that subgenre in a really creative way. So again, Arrival, fantastic. The next one I'm going to mention is The Fountain. The Fountain by Darren Aronofsky came out in 2006. It's a brilliant use of nonlinear storytelling, and this is another one where you understand that you're being jumped around time frames, and you don't necessarily know how all of them connect, and they start weaving the threads in between them in a better way. Like you start getting more of a sense of where this is headed and where this is going, but it's basically, it tells a story in three different time periods, like an ancient, kind of conquistador time period, a modern era set time period, and then some random future time frame. And in all the cases, they use the same actors throughout each time frame, and how they use that to craft the narrative and to craft the story. And you're not entirely sure as you watch the movie for the first time how all of it links up or how all of it connects. And then it just connects at the end in this kind of powerful way when you realize what's happening and what's going on. And really, in particular, using time the way they did as a method of telling the story in a story about someone who doesn't know how to deal with death and mortality. And then using time as an element of storytelling, I think really adds to the dimensions of this film.
Yeah. I mean, you're seeing the characters are not only if I'm remembering this correctly, not only played by the same people, but like they are the same people. Is that correct?
And yeah, and some of the time, in two
Okay.
of the timelines, the people are still the same people.
Okay.
In particular, now I'm blanking. Hugh Jackman
Mhm.
is the same in two. Is Hugh Jackman in two of the timelines? The third one is just somebody played by Hugh Jackman,
Okay.
and you find out why. Like
Yeah.
without giving too much of the story away. You initially don't know where the conquistador timeline fits in, and then you figure it out, partway through the movie.
Mhm.
They kind of give you a clue as to what's happening and why that time frame exists.
Yeah. And I do really like that movie. I just have not seen it in a little while.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm a little foggy on the details.
Mhm. No, it's
I also say about this
Mhm.
as a side note. This is probably one of the most beautiful movies
Mhm.
I've ever seen.
Absolutely.
When it comes to visuals.
Yeah.
Not that that's necessarily tied to what we're talking about, but it is like it's a movie you could watch with no sound and still just be
Mhm.
floored by how it was shot.
Yeah, it's a stunningly beautiful film, and it's Darren Aronofsky's best movie.
Yeah.
And no doubt. Now, I know it's not for everybody. Not everybody connects with this movie, because it can be a little difficult. And if you don't follow along with it, you're not going to be as emotionally invested in it if you're not thinking through it. But it really, really is a good movie. All right, what's your third one?
So my third one is very much tied to the same conceit as The Fountain, which is you're dealing with multiple different storylines, but it takes the multiple different storylines and explodes it to like the nth degrees.
Yeah.
And it's all based on the fact that that is what happens in the book that the movie is based on. David Mitchell wrote the book called The Cloud Atlas.
Mhm.
And in it there are, I think, 5 distinct storylines. The original, like the oldest one, goes all the way back to slave trading in like the British West Indies in the 1700s, and it goes all the way to a dystopian future.
Yeah.
In New Tokyo. And like you said with The Fountain, they're all connected, but you're not really sure how they're connected. The first time you watch it, you're not really sure if they are connected. And then you start to see how they come together. And they also, in much the same way as The Fountain, use a lot of the same actors in the different settings, but they're playing completely different characters. And when they show you want to watch the credits of this movie because they show who's playing all the actors, and you're like, that was them.
There are some that it's really, you don't really realize
like the makeup they use and just the effects they use. They do a really good job of disguising who some of the people are.
And it takes a lot. I mean, it takes a lot for the actors on those, having to play that many different roles.
This is very much a slow burn of a movie.
Yeah.
It is 3 hours and 20 minutes long, I think. But it's one of the few movies I think that deserves to be that long. And the word epic is overused, but I think that this movie qualifies as that. And it's one that has a very strong emotional undergirding to it too. And I think this is the movie that introduced me to Ben Whishaw. And he's a great actor.
Yes.
I just watched him again in Skyfall.
Yeah.
But he plays a young composer in this movie and plays him excellently. And I can't say I necessarily agree with all of the social commentary within the book or the movie, but I think a lot of it is stuff we should talk about even if we don't agree with it.
Yeah.
And I think it helps bring to light, just the discussion we can have about people and how they're different and what separates the big thing in the movie is what separates us and what brings us together.
Yeah.
As people. And like I said, a lot of people play different characters in this movie. Tom Hanks is such a phenomenal actor. And in this movie, he gets the opportunity to play like 5 different people.
And they're very different characters.
And he is excellent at every single one.
It takes an actor with the chops of Tom Hanks on that level just to be able to pull that off.
I mean, he plays everything from like a racist slave driver to a 1980s British pulp fiction writer to an old man who's in the dystopian future on another planet.
Yeah.
All in this one movie.
Yeah.
it's kind of mind blowing. Step back and look at the breadth of the characters he plays.
For sure. For sure. It really, yeah, it is a classic example of that type of nonlinear storytelling. And again, the visuals in this movie are rather stunning. The different sets and the scenery and the acting is really, really well done. So the last one I'll go with, I have to go with The Prestige. The Prestige is, while not the first nonlinear storytelling movie of Christopher Nolan's, I think it is one of the apex movies of the genre of nonlinear storytelling. And the use of the back and forth. It tells the story of two magicians in the 1800s as they both rise to prominence, and as the rivalry between them grows more and more bitter and contentious. And it is constantly leaping back and forth to different points in the storyline of these two. At some points in the movie, they're both reading each other's diaries that they have acquired at different points in the storyline, and then each of their diaries end up pointing back to the other person at some point. It's so well done how they craft it out. There's sometimes where you see something like someone has a limp and you have no idea why they have a limp, and then you wait until a half hour later where you figure, oh, that's how he has a limp. Oh, okay, that's what's going on. Okay, why is this character here? Oh, okay, he's here. And like the grand revelation at the end when you see all of it unfold as to what actually happened that led to where they are, and it's just like, oh, it goes to a dark place, but it hits you in a powerful way. And just the skill with which Nolan and his brother Jonathan, as they wrote it, as the skill at which they interweave the story and what they tell when, and how they use that to reveal different parts of the story, is just constantly keeping you on the edge of your seat, constantly keeping you guessing. And it's one of the best, most dynamic examples of nonlinear storytelling from the writing and directing and acting standpoint. Just the combination of all of it just culminates in this brilliant film. That was one of the last ones he's done on a small budget.
Yeah.
And just amazing.
Well, the thing, like, I always felt from the first time I saw it that even though it's done with a smaller budget, like it doesn't feel like it's done with a smaller budget.
No, it doesn't.
And
it feels more intimate, but
yeah.
it doesn't feel like it's.
And I will contend there are not many better things in this universe since its inception than David Bowie playing Nicholas.
Yeah, and just kind of the blank stare.
One of the least expected things I've ever experienced in a movie was seeing David Bowie show up in Tesla.
And he really went hard after him to get him to play that role.
And
he did not want to.
I thought he did very well.
It's one of the only times Nolan has gone back to an actor who's turned him down and tried to basically beg him to play the role. And eventually he succeeded. But yeah. And I think originally Hugh Jackman, it's either one of these two, I might have it wrong. Originally Hugh Jackman auditioned for the role of Borden. Mm-hmm. And then after reading it, was like, no, I really need to do this other character. Perfectly cast. Mm-hmm. Perfectly cast, because Hugh Jackman, the performer, the former Broadway guy, this guy is definitely the showman of the two. Whereas Christian Bale is a much more down-to-earth, gritty, which is what the character of Borden really is.
But I think at the same token, though, like Christian Bale's performance is no less impressive.
No, not at all.
To be able to play that with authenticity, is very difficult, and he nails it.
Because the role he has to play in this is so very specific.
Yeah,
and the twist along with that.
There is just a phenomenal contrast between Christian Bale's character, kind of like his emotions are on his sleeve, mm-hmm. and Hugh Jackman kind of tries, to keep everything bottled up, but then eventually like it all comes out.
Mhm.
Whereas Christian Bale's character the whole time it's coming out.
Yeah.
And to see that interplay between them and they're back and forth and they're
Mhm.
poking each other and prodding each other and
Mhm.
getting on each other's nerves and trying to make the other one make a mistake and it's a fantastic.
And one of the characteristics of pretty much all of the nonlinear storytelling movies is whenever you get a movie told in this framework, you always have to see it again. It always looks different the second time you see it. Once you've got the idea and you got the hang of it, or you've got the twist in your mind, it tends to rewrite in your mind how things appeared throughout the rest of the movie. So one of the characteristics, if you're going to test out one of these movies for the first time, one of the things you should be aware of is you're going to have to come back to these movies again a second time. Once you know what's going on, once you get the storyline, once you get the storytelling method or the twist or anything along those lines, seeing it again just gives you an extra level of appreciation. Okay, that's our nonlinear storytelling discussion. So I thought we'd go back to something we haven't done in a while, and that's recommend some movies. So we're going to recommend a few movies for you, and Rob will recommend movies on Peacock, and I will recommend movies on Amazon Prime. So Rob, hit us with movies for Peacock.
I'm going to go ahead and kind of cheat.
Okay.
Because Peacock has just come out with a mini series that the last one of which comes out today, called The Continental.
Ah, I see.
Not strictly a movie, but it is based on the John Wick universe and the hotel.
Yes.
The eponymous hotel, The Continental. And I will say that I've watched the first two parts of this 3-part miniseries now. And we've talked about this before, how some of the lines are being very blurred between what a movie is and what a TV show is. Production quality wise, there are some TV shows that feel like movies, and there are some movies that feel like TV shows.
Yeah.
A lot of it is based on how it's shot, who's involved in it, and the Continental. One of the main characters is played by the one and only Mel Gibson, and he plays the bad guy. And he is fantastic as the bad guy. A lot of people in real life, he is a bad guy. But in this movie, he is unhinged. This miniseries, and I'm saying movie because it really does feel like just a long movie.
Okay.
It's got great style. It has a lot of the feeling of the John Wick movies. So if you're familiar with John Wick movies, Winston, who is the guy who runs the Continental with John Wick this is his backstory. So this is him when they took over and he assumed power of the hotel in the first place with him and his brother and a group of friends. Very gritty, very dark. It's the 50s and 60s. It's violent. Obviously, it's a John Wick.
It's John Wick universe, yeah.
But to add on to that, the John Wick movies are on Peacock also.
Yes.
I think that it would probably be beneficial or helpful for you to watch the John Wick movies first, at least the first one, just to get an idea
of what the Continental is.
Because then it will give you some more understanding and give it some more gravitas as far as what you're watching and the character that you're watching.
Yeah.
Because his character in the John Wick movies is phenomenal. So to see some of his backstory is really cool to see what it was like when he was growing up, like what motivated him to become who he became. Another one that's on, so two other ones that are on Peacock that were big movies over the last couple of years. If you've not had a chance to see it, I would recommend seeing, even if you're not necessarily a huge fan of these genres. Fast 10 on Peacock.
Yes.
One thing that we went through at one point all of the Fast and the Furious movies. The one thing that's great about the Fast and Furious movies is you really don't need to have seen any of the other ones to get what's going on in Fast and Furious.
Yes. Not intricate plot.
Yeah, like there might be some like more emotional weight you'll get from certain things, but you don't need to have seen the other ones to. They're all very much standalone movies, and Fast 10 is in the same wavelength. And Jason Momoa is out of control this movie in the best possible way.
Yes. Yes.
This character is
Ooh.
both incredibly disturbing and very hilarious. So I recommend checking out Fast 10. And then the other one is Super Mario Brothers.
Yes.
So if you have not seen Super Mario Brothers yet, you should see it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's by no means is it like a paragon of cinema or one of the best movies ever made, but it's really good.
Yeah.
And there's a reason that it made $1 bajillion. So
Which,
if you haven't seen it, you should check it out.
in reality, that probably should have been the precursor to how well Barbie was going to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Awesome. So I did Amazon Prime, and the first one I'm going to recommend is Air. And I'll talk about this now. I actually watched this week, and so that's why it's on my recommendation list. This movie tells the story of how Nike landed Michael Jordan. And the Nike-Michael Jordan partnership has been, I want to say, and I don't think this is a stretch to say, the greatest corporate athlete partnership that has ever existed. They've made each other ridiculous amounts of money to the point where I just saw this week Jordan is listed in the top 400 wealthiest people in the world. And more than a little bit of that is due to his partnership with Nike. And it's been one of those mutually beneficial relationships that has lasted for 40 years now. And it tells it's an underdog story because Nike was nothing in the basketball world at this point. They were a very, very little piece of the basketball world. And so it's so funny watching this, looking back at the landscape of where basketball was in the shoe realm and where it is from the perspective of where it is now. And all of that's because of Michael Jordan. So it's really well done. It's got Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. So that's a thing. But it's really good. It's a good movie. You'll like it. Another one, Vengeance. Ryan from The Office. I'm blanking out on his name right now.
BJ Novak.
BJ Novak. Yes, BJ Novak stars in this one. And this is a fascinating movie about that's kind of reflective of a divided culture. Because BJ Novak is a like New York City inner city blogger, like, typical New Yorker. And he ends up kind of getting coerced into going down and covering the story of this missing girl, this dead girl who, he had dated once down in like Texas. And so it's this major like clash of cultures, but there's a lot of commentary about cultures and about different things that in particular the US is struggling with, but it's just a really well told story. And it has a different interesting ending to it as to where it wraps up, but it really plays around with stereotypes and how one side of the country views another side of the country and back and forth. So it's really well done, and how people are not the stereotypes that you think they are. So Vengeance, really good. Another one I'll throw out there, Crimson Tide. 1990 sub movie, Denzel Washington, Gene Hackman, Viggo Mortensen. Talked about submarine movies always are packed with drama. This one adds in the element of rogue nuclear forces in the former Soviet Union, and all of the play that comes in there. But the cast is phenomenal. The action packed, going back and forth. Even the way they shot the film with the lighting and the scenery and that congested feel you get into a submarine. Really, really well done sub movie.
Yeah, it's always a good sub movie. It's always a good call.
Yes, I agree. The Lincoln Lawyer. Many people are familiar with the Netflix series, The Lincoln Lawyer. That has been there are 2 seasons out now, and so people have been watching that. They're based on the Michael Connelly novels, but there was originally a movie done with Matthew McConaughey playing the Lincoln Lawyer.
I thought it was all right. All right.
I knew there was something coming. I knew there was something coming. But it's a good one that tells a story. So if you like Michael Connelly, you like the novels, or if you've even liked the Netflix series, this is a good one to go back to. And one I'm going to be checking out this week that I haven't watched, but I figured I'd recommend it because I'm going to be checking out The Lost City of Z. And this is basically, it's based on a true story of a British explorer in, I think, South America, Amazon region, who finds evidence of an ancient civilization that nobody knew existed. So it's kind of like a historical drama mystery type thing. So I'm going to be watching The Lost City of Z. All right. We'll conclude quickly with our watch list movies that we watched this week. Rob, I know you watched Saw 10.
Yes. So I saw. And like I said, this one kind of did a little things a little differently than some of the other ones. One of the criticisms of some of the other ones, especially in the middle of the series, is that they were just violent to be violent. Like Ryan said, in seeing the first one, there is a story. Behind it. There's a reason behind the character's actions. And
there's a point behind the violence. It's a dark point, it's a brutal point, but there is an actual motive and point behind it.
So one of the questions that people had going into this movie, and this is not a spoiler because it was in the trailers, is that Jigsaw, played by Tobin Bell, is back in this movie. So how is he in this movie? Because he's dead in the series. So this actually takes place previous to the newest ones. So it's kind of like his, in a lot of ways, it felt like it was like his last hurrah story. So the guy goes to get special treatment for the cancer that he has, like aggressive experimental procedure done on him. And it turns out that they didn't actually do anything to him at all. They just knocked him out and stole $250,000 from him that he paid. Them. So he rounds up everyone who's involved in the procedure and gives them each a challenge based on what they had done as part of it. But the first 45 minutes to an hour of this movie are very much just a regular movie. There's only one scene of any kind of violence or torture, and it's his character imagining doing something to somebody, not actually doing it. And then the next good, like I said, 45 minutes is the storyline of him living with this disease, trying to figure out how to address it, being told about this place you can go. And then all chaos breaks loose once he figures out what happened to him. And he is not the guy you want to make upset.
No. He is not.
He is I think that Tobin is a very good actor, and I think especially for this role, like there's just something about his voice and his presence that is really perfect for that character. Because he is menacing, but not in a but you still can believe that ultimately he wants people to have an opportunity to redeem themselves or to see the error of their ways. He's not just like killing people to kill people. There's always a way to make it out of the challenge he gives you, but the way to get out of it is probably not something you're going to like. And this is no different. There were definitely some moments where I was at the screen. Not to watch if you're squeamish. For sure. On the other side of the perspective, I watched a much more terrifying movie, Paw Patrol and Mighty Puppy. And I was not prepared for the Dora the Explorer short on Paw Patrol.
I have heard things about this. I've heard things about this Dora the Explorer.
Done with Dora the Explorer, but Dora the Explorer was not done with me. We didn't need any more of that. So I will say that Saw 10 I gave a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Paw Patrol I gave it 2 out of 5 stars, and those were pretty much in line. I like to look at what I rated it compared to what everybody else on Letterboxd, that's the app I use, rates it, and they're both pretty similar. In fact, Saw was actually getting more like towards a 4 out of 5 general consensus voting people. I did also watch a couple other movies. The other one I'll mention was Skyfall. Like I said, I watched Ben Whishaw again. Skyfall there are very, very few movies. So very few movies that I would say merit a 5-star rating. The Skyfall is one for me.
Mhm.
And my goodness,
Yeah.
a lot of people don't like Daniel Craig. A lot of people don't like Daniel Craig because they don't like someone who's blonde being James Bond, which is like the dumbest thing
I
think
agree.
ever. But this is my favorite James Bond movie.
Mhm.
I've seen all of them.
Yeah.
And it would take a lot for it to be replaced, in my estimation.
Yeah.
I don't think it's possible to make a better James Bond movie.
Yeah. We'll need to we'll need to do an episode where we do a deep dive on Skyfall and just go through it, kind of like we did with Gladiator. We're gonna have to do that with Skyfall. It's so good. So good. For me, the one I'll talk about, I did talk about Air already. The other one I'll talk about is I rewatched Good Will Hunting. And another kind of preview to something I want to do coming up in a later episode is every time I watch this movie, I love Robin Williams' performance in this more and more and more. He is so good in this movie. And it's one of the first dramatic roles he ever did. Like the depth and the range that he does while still being, funny Robin Williams at times. It's like, it's perfect. I mean, there's so much great acting in this film. And of course, it's the one that, launched Matt Damon and why am I blanking out on Ben Affleck's name? There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
how do you like them apples?
I like them apples. That's certainly it's an iconic film. It's one of the best films of the 90s. And it is just so well done. And it's worth a watch. If you haven't seen it, definitely go see it. All right. That is the show. Thank you for checking out Film for Fans. And I will say, due to a weird technical snafu, the Film for Fans website is down. But hopefully in the next week or so, that will be back up. So don't go to filmforfans.com this week. Wait until next week. But tell your friends about the podcast, rate, subscribe, watch it on YouTube, all those things. And until next time, enjoy the movies.